Well, hello everybody, my name is Eddie Cole and welcome to my channel. As you can probably see here from this, I kinda, how could I say this? I grew excited from my last video, I watched Ben Shapiro ranking the left, and that was kinda horrible. There were some good points here and there, but most of it was pretty dumb. And here I am today making my own tier list on something that I personally am very attached to, which is Finnish history, especially the Finnish history following the independence of the country. And yes, we are making a Finnish tier list, Finnish president's tier list. All of the 12 presidents of Finland being listed right here. And so how this will go is basically I will give a brief or a longer explanation of these people, their policies, what they did before as president, and if that has any accountability towards how good their presidency was. And yes, that's about it. So as we can see, all of the Finnish presidents are in F here. No, I just moved them here because it was easier. We're doing this in the chronological order, starting from Stolper and going to Niinistö. So yeah, we're doing that today. So I guess we'll just begin with the MVP himself, Stolberg, one of the most influential figures independent of the independent history of Finland. I would actually go ahead and say he is the most influential figure in that history, along with Johann Wilhelm Snellman. Uh, so, who he was the senator, or he was a senator during Finland's autonomy, and he was also a member of the parliament during Finland's autonomy. He was a vehement opponent of Russification, although he didn't want to use any force to bring about the independence of Finland. One thing worth noting before his presidency was that he was a supporter of a women's suffrage. Back then in those days, women's rights or women rights weren't considered that cool, but he went ahead and said that women are very cool, and he basically, yeah, that's important to note. He drafted the legislation uh, that re, uh, that led to the creation of the Parliament of Finland, and this is also something that was very out from the mainstream view back then. He was strictly against prohibition, which actually he resigned from the Senate because of a bill that, or because of a prohibition bill was passed. And that was kind of cool of him. He wrote the Finnish administrative laws. He also, well, he was basically the architect of the Constitution of Finland, and he also was one of those rare people who, well, not rare, but it was about, I'd say, 25% of the Finnish population who believed in the republic instead of the constitutional monarchy. It was probably the biggest feud in the early independent days of Finland, whether Finland would have a monarch, and if we were going to have a monarch, whether it be our own monarch or Karl Friedrich from Germany to strengthen the alliance between Finland and Germany. But he opposed the whole monarchy and instead wanted a republic. And then he was elected as president in 1919. Although I will have to admit he wasn't elected democratically. He was elected through parliament, and without because Finland had gone through a civil war, and there was some fears that some of the red uh, some of the people who were on the sides of the Reds in the Civil War would be voted in as the president of Finland. So instead, the elections were held only inside of the parliament. And so, yeah, he wasn't elected democratically. That should be mentioned. But holy shit, was he a great man. I mean, well, first of all, he negotiated the bill that it gave trade unions the equal power in contrast to employers' organizations to, negotiate labor contracts, I think it was. Something about his presidency that I never quite liked was the whole Åland crisis, in which, well, all the people of Åland, the vast majority of Åland, wanted to reunify with Sweden now that Finland had become its independent nation, and well, he opposed this very well, not very vehemently, but he still did oppose it, and well, the Autonomy Act of Åland was passed in 1920. However, I will have to say that it was more or less the blame of Karl Enkel, who had very strong ties with the League of Nations to pass this act. So even considering that, it was very small bit to blame Stolberg there, I think. He signed a public care for the poor in 1921, I think. He also signed Lex Kallio in 1922, which I still consider to be the greatest piece of Finnish legislation after the constitution. Basically, what Lex Kallio did was it redistributed land from the powerful uh, Swedish and Russian oligarch landowners back to the peasant farmers, the Finnish people. So yeah, it was basically a communist piece of legislation, although it was never, of course, said to be such. Also, something important about his, well, he refused in 1925 when his term came to an end. He refused to run for election again because he thought that he would be able to convince the constitutional monarchs who still remained in Finland of the superiority of the uh, of the republic. So all of that, this motherfucking MVP, Stolberg, I consider him to be either the greatest or the second greatest president of Finland, in the whole history of Finland. So yes, he deserves an ass. All right, Stolberg. Then we have Lauri Christian Relander, who, according to some, is the worst president of Finland's history. Now, there isn't much to be said about his political career before his presidency. We know that he was kind of, well, he was a young man and a very inexperienced leader, which was kind of bad for for the whole for his whole presidency. But he was the first democratically elected president of Finland. He may have uh, taken a more of a representative president view, like, he made many foreign tours, in contrast to Stolberg, who only once met a head of state outside of Finland. He met Konstantin Pats, the president of Estonia, once. Uh, yeah, Relander didn't do much except hate communists. Well, he didn't have like any sort of policy for his for the whole of his presidency. He didn't have. He dissolved, I think, two governments during his time, and basically for absolutely no reasons. In 1930, I think he tried to convince Kallio and his government to start anti-communist to stop the trade of anti-communist or to stop the trade of communist propaganda. So any left wing newspapers or such things, and well, Kallio refused, and what this led to was that Relander basically dissolved the whole government. Yeah. He also was kinda a fan of the patriotic people's movement. So the hold on. No, what am I saying? Not the patriotic people's movement. I meant Lapua movement. Yeah, these are very hard terms to turn into English. But yeah, the Lapua movement until uh, until Lapua movement kidnapped Stolberg in 1930, after which he actually said that shaking hands with Vihtori Kosola, the leader of the Lapua movement, uh, was the worst mistake of his entire presidency. So, with all of that in mind, I actually won't say that he was the worst president of Finland, uh, but he was the second worst. He goes to E. Uh, I won't reveal yet who the worst president of Finland was, but I will soon enough. So next we have Per Evin Svinhufvud. Oh yeah, Relander was president from 1925 to 1931. Per Evin Svinhufvud, one of the founding fathers of independent Finland. He was a senator. He protected the state of the Finnish language in the Senate, opposed Russification. He was an important figure of Gagaul, which was an anti-Russian movement in from 1899 to 1905. And also Stolperi was a member of that movement, but he wasn't that important of a character there. Well, he unified the Parliament of Finland by getting the support of the Social Democrats in 1917. This was kind of a big thing because the whole Parliament had been kind of torn apart during, well, after and before the Civil War, but after the independence itself. In 1917, he went ahead and went to. I'm actually not sure whether it was. I think he went to Moscow to talk to Lenin and gained gained Soviet Russia's recognition of Finland as an independent state. That was, of course, very important. Uh, well, of course it was. Getting Soviet Russia's recognition of independence was very influential. One thing that wasn't very good before his presidency was how he refused to well, the Tsar power gave him the kind of this ultimatum in 1914: either you leave your position as a judge or we exile you to Siberia. And of course, symbolically, this was a good move, but he refused, and he was cast to Siberia, which led him to not being able to pretty much take any contact in or meddle with the politics of Finland. He was there until 1917. The only contact he really had was Ellen Svinhufvud, who was his wife, and yeah, he was a supporter of the constitutional monarchy. It was Mannerheim who didn't want Karl Frederick as king because, well, he didn't like Germany that much. But then Svinhufvud wanted King Frederick or King Väinö as the king of Finland, and yeah, he was the regent of Finland from, hold on, May 1918 to December 1918, then Mannerheim was the second regent of Finland from December 1918 to July 1919. During his time as regent, he took some time in uh, helping after the civil war. You know, he pardoned all of the imprisoned red soldiers whose imprisonment was to last only 4 years or shorter. But then later I think he gave parole to every soldier whose imprisonment was to last less than 6 years. But on the other hand, he also pardoned every war criminal of the civil guard. So not a good look on him. That he ended prohibition. He did that. 1931 there was a referendum, and in 1932 he signed it, accepted it, and I think his greatest achievement was, without a doubt, dissolving the Mäntsälä rebellion, the only coup d'etat in the history of Finland. Uh, and it was a failed coup d'etat because, well, the Lapuan movement went to Mäntsälä. They were trying to overthrow the government, and Svinhuvud told them to go home as men and not as murderers. and and it's really really beautiful how completely bloodlessly, without any use of force, he did that. It was a very nice moment in the history of Finland. That was 1932. Afterwards, the Lapuan movement started dissolving. Soon it became the Patriotic People's Movement, which then stopped existing in 1944. But he actually got elected with the help of Lapuan movement, and he was kind of mm, with uh, with them until he wasn't. He didn't intervene in foreign politics that much, and one thing that happened, which makes me very sad, was that Lex Kallio wasn't or was dissolved in 1936 during his time as president. But there wasn't much he could have done about it, I don't think. Yeah, he was president for one term, 1931 to 1937, and definitely, I would make the claim, maybe even the third greatest leader of Finland. Maybe even, well, yeah, third or fourth greatest. He gets an 8 here. Kyösti Kallio, president from 1937 to 1940. The only one, or the first one to not finish his whole term. Before presidency, he had the basic stuff. He opposed Russification, actually opposed the monarchy too, and he was a member of the Kagall also. He took some part in some Swedish, when some of the members of the Kagall had to go to exile to Sweden. He took part in some meetings there, some secret meetings or whatever they were. Created Lex Kallio, definitely his greatest achievement in 1922. Drafted it. Greatest legislation of Finland after the constitution, of course. Oh yeah, he rejected the position as the leader of the Lapuan movement, after which the Lapuan movements kind of started hating on him. Uh, in 1923, Kallio's government did this thing called the Kallio Cut, which I don't like. Basically, they arrested 200 influential socialist politicians, or they weren't really even politicians, they were influential civil socialists and communists. I don't like that. There weren't very much ground for most of those. They hadn't been violent or anything, they hadn't been causing any problems. During his time in the parliament and in his government, he basically did pretty much nothing to lessen the impact of the Great Depression in 1929 to 1932 about. He was also elected democratically, as was Relander and Svinhufvud. Well, he was a very influential figure, or a very well received figure in international foreign politics. You know, he actually received a telegram congratulating him as he became president from Mikhail Kalinin, who was the what the fuck was he? He was like the leader of the presidium of the Soviet Union, which basically means like it's kind of what a representative president would be these days. After the Mansala rebellion, he worked kind of as like a bridge builder figure, helping the radical left or the radical right wing and the rest of the political spectrum unite once again. Well, then the Winter War. Sadly, he kind of got excited about his well-received foreign politics. Eventually, he he can to some extent be considered the reason the Winter War started. He failed to bring any help during his visit to Stockholm from the Nordic countries to help Finland militarily. Well, the good thing is he signed the Moscow Peace Treaty. Yeah, he signed the Moscow Peace Treaty, and well, well, there's everyone always has to mention this talking about uh when talking about Kyösti Kallio. There is the famous quote which he said while signing the Moscow Peace Treaty that may my hand wither, for it has to sign this contract. And his hand paralyzed 6 months ago. 6 months later, I'm sorry. I believe, well, he was the first typical Finnish man. He was a communist in every essence of the word and a socialist, but then because communism and socialism was in any way uh, attracted towards towards Russia, he was like, no, 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 no communism, no socialism. I just don't like the word. But I like to believe he was still a true man of the people who tried his best, but his best was D. So yeah, not a very good president, unfortunately. Then we have Risto Ryti, 1940 to 1944. Very influential financier before or financier, not a financier, uh, a financial politician before his presidency. He basically managed to eradicate all of Finland's debt by 1939. Uh, but yeah, actually, that's not even Finland's debt went down, and it plummeted down to less than 1% of the whole GDP, which is the lowest it has ever been. And he one of the rare countries that had in 1932 paid all of its debts to the U.S. And he was one of those people who negotiated the Moscow Peace Treaty with officials of the Soviet Union. Some things uh, that I don't like that much about him. He opposed the ban on death penalty and opposed pardoning red soldiers. This may be due to some of his feelings towards his family. You know, his brothers were in the Civil War and they fought along the Civil Guard, and one of them died in the Civil War. Very sad. He also opposed the left wing in a very, very strong fashion. Um, but yeah, ideologically, I don't like him that much. But I have to admit, he was very good at his job, even before as president. But even then, against when he was a president, he tried to remain neutral, as well as he could. And when eventually the continuation war started, he gave uh, he gave Karelians the possibility to stay in the Soviet Union if they wanted, because Karelia was conquered by the Soviet Union then. And he made the most fucking high IQ play in the history of the independent Finland. He really knew how to play the Game of Thrones. He what I'm talking about is the Ryti-Ribbentrop Pact signed in 1944. 1943? No, it has to be 1944. Basically, what the pact said was that, well, it was supposed to give to Germany. The pact said that Finland will not be at peace with the Soviet Union without the acceptance of Germany. Now, here comes the trick. The trick was that Ryti signed the pact with his own name. He didn't sign it as, the government of Finland or anything like that. He signed it with his own name and resigned right after. He resigned as president, and he knew that this could possibly get him the death penalty, and he did it anyway to protect Finland. And it would have worked. It would have worked, but we'll get into a but soon enough. Yeah, that's Risto Ryti. Basically, what the Ryti-Ribbentrop Pact would have ensured was that Finland didn't have to go to war with the Soviet Union or Germany. That's what it would have done. For all of this, I really wanted to hate Ryti because of his ideological beliefs. He believed he was a very strong capitalist. He was a libertarian. He believed that the government's power should be minimized when it came to economics. But I have to admire what he did, most of the things. I'll have to give him a B, and it's a high B. I would even consider an A, but not quite an A. Now will come, without a doubt, my most controversial claim to make yet. We have as the sixth president from 1944 to 1946, Carl Gustav Emil Mannerheim, the worst president in the history of the independent Republic of Finland. Oh, I can feel that there. That probably causes some ruckus. First of all, I must say that both in the history of the Russian Empire and in the history of the Republic of Finland, Mannerheim was an absolutely irreplaceable asset when it came to war, and he was a terrible, terrible politician. And actually, now that I say that, his place is right there in the F tier. But now we should probably go into the whys. Well, first of all, before the presidency, well, I mean, he is kind of one of the founding fathers of Finland, most definitely. He supported the monarchy, although he didn't want Carl Fredrik as the king of Finland. One great thing was that during the Civil War he wanted no foreign aid. He thought that the Civil War should be fought against the civils, whites against the reds. However, the whites and the civil guard who escaped from Vasa did gain some help from, well, especially from Germany. Many war crimes were committed under his command during the Civil War. We know of the imprisonment camps where people, the Reds, were executed left and right. I almost forgot about this. How he basically, well, he wanted to, along with Britain, he wanted to keep on fighting the war against communism after the Civil War, and he even suggested to Winston Churchill that the Finnish government could be overthrown. Stolberg's government. Stolberg's government. Yeah, I uh, I really don't. Uh, yeah, that was when Britain rejected his offer. Uh, he was kind of ideologically supportive of the Lapua movement, but he didn't support the acts of terror they committed, if you can call them that. And then, as president, he was probably the worst president of Finland. Well, first of all, he was elected undemocratically, as was also Ryti. He was elected undemocratically twice, and Stolberg once was also elected undemocratically. The worst thing he did was dissolve or illegitimize the Ryti-Ribbentrop Pact, which would have ensured peace between Soviet Union and between Germany. And he dissolved that, which led to a Lapland War. So a lot of lives lay on his hands, on his shoulders. He kind of did nothing. Paasikivi, who was back then the prime minister, kind of took on both the role of the prime minister and the president, as Mannerheim was the president. He was fucking just baiting in Spain, Mannerheim. That's I'm not even joking. He did that in 1945, I think. And he kind of did nothing as a president, except lead us to our last war, the Lapland War. Yeah. So yeah, Mannerheim definitely deserving of the F tier, in my opinion. Simply for being a war criminal and being a president who kind of did nothing except war. Juho Kusti Paasikivi. Oh, there's a lot to say about him. Well, not all of these dudes, but for example, Ryti and Relander weren't that uh, much having to do with the independence of Finland. Paasikivi, who was a president much later than Relander and later than Ryti, had actually a lot to do with the independence of Finland. He against the general mainstream idea, he condemned. Well, although he was much against Russification, he condemned. He condemned Eugen Schaumann's murder. Well, that was a weird accent. Murder of Nikolai Bobrikov in 1904, calling it an outrageous crime. He was also part of Stolberg's constitutional committee, which he was one of the architects of the constitution, along with Stolberg, who most definitely has had the most effects on it. Well, he was kind of also a bridge builder and a negotiator. He managed to kind of pull the national coalition back from being fallen into a patriotic people's movement and into that ideology. He negotiated the Treaty of Tartu in 1920, tried to negotiate peace in 1944, but the parliament denied those conditions, which I don't like. He supported recognizing the communist parties, although Mannerheim, who then was the president, was strictly against it. As a finance senator, he wanted to hoard massive amounts of foreign debt to pay for Finland's expenses. This was back in his early years, 1908. He supported the monarchy also, In 1939, he didn't manage to negotiate for peace. Uh, However, Elias Erkko, who was the foreign affairs minister back then, he had given some pretty strict restrictions on what he could negotiate with. He was elected as president undemocratically. As president, he did pretty well. He signed the YYA treaty, the yhteistyöavunantosopimus. He managed to negotiate the Porkkala naval base back to Finland, which was supposed in 1944. It was declared that it would remain for 50 years as a naval base of the Soviet Union. He managed to get it back in 1956, I think. He finished paying for the war reparations, although it did take quite long. He paid them back in 1952. Some historians, I guess, would argue that it could have been done sooner, even as early as 1948, but I'd still say it as kind of a plus. The minus, I'd say, was that he made Finland a part of the United Nations in 1955. This kind of set a bad precedent for what was about to happen in the meetings of the United Nations. Finland had to try to assume neutrality with things involving both the Soviet Union and the US, and that kind of became hard, especially the Korean War was going on then. I don't think Finland ever. I don't think Finland joined it quickly enough to vote on any of the matters on the Korean War, but even then, I don't think it was a good decision, back then at least, to join the UN. Considering all of this, I would say that Juho Kusti Paasikivi was a good president, a solid B, I would say. Now, next, Urho Kaleva Kekkonen. There's quite some things to be said about him. He stood against the radical right wing from a young age. He was a part of the Karelia Academic Society, which he then quit because they refused to not give ideological. Well, they refused to stop giving ideological support for the Lapua movement. He wrote about the rising dictatorships in Europe, and he kind of warned about the coming war in Demokratian itsepuolustus, a book written by him in 1934. He created the K-line, which allowed for Finland to keep bilateral trade with the Soviet Union. Along with Paasikivi, who was then president, he was able to secure some of the ties with the Soviet Union and Finland following the wars. He's well. Well, also, now that I mentioned Demokratia and Itsepuolustus, I think he also in the book wrote that he kinda was towards supporting restrictions on freedom of speech if it was about combating fascism. I don't like that. I think freedom of speech, you should be able to say that fascism is great. I don't think that freedom should be taken away from you. That could be an all other video in and of itself. Kekkosen konstit, when he was the Minister of Justice, he tried to dissolve the Patriotic People's Movement in 1938, and even on top of that, he failed. I don't even think that dissolving the Patriotic People's Movement was a good idea. It was still a democratic party. It was radically right-wing, it was ultra-nationalist, but it was still a democratic party. Nothing wrong with it necessarily. One thing that I don't really like about Kekkonen was that he didn't support the Moscow Peace Treaty in 1940. I don't know what... In hindsight, I don't really know what else we could have done. Then, well, there's quite a lot to say about his terms as president. He was president 4 times, elected the first 2 elections were kind of fair. The first one, there is often said that uh, he's he was somehow involved with the KGB, or that the uh, the votes that made him the stronger candidate than Karl August Fagerholm were purchased from Russia. Now, I think this actually resulted in that uh, the US didn't congratulate Kekkonen for his presidency, and well, it might have been even the fact that Kekkonen was trying to build good relations with the Soviet Union, and I think I think the foreign affairs minister back then, John Foster Dulles, under Kennedy, he actually said publicly, no, not under Kennedy, I'm sorry, under Eisenhower, he declared that they wouldn't give out any congratulations towards Kekkonen. So it wasn't just complete ignoring, it was actually saying, fuck you, we don't like you. Then, well, yeah, here comes what I talked about the United Nations before during Paasikivi. We, when it came to Hungary, uh, there was the uprising of Hungary in the 50s, 1956, and uh, and Finland went the way which most of the countries took. That actually, it wasn't the most of the countries that took this way, but they said that no sanctions on the Soviet Union, and on top of that, the the freedom and the liberty of the Hungarian people and its democracy should stay. Uh, this kind of assured Finnish neutrality and kinda didn't. Fortunately, the Finnish withdrew from that vote in the UN. He then also ordered the Finnish representatives of the United Nations to always withdraw from voting if in the UN's outline the Soviet Union was criticized. He dissolved Karl August Fagerholm's government, towards which the Soviet Union had been critical of, stopping trade with Finland and withdrawing diplomats from Helsinki. Uh, that was in 1958, I think. Uh, he refused economic help from the United States uh, in 1958. They were offered to him by Hubert Humphrey, the Democrat senator. He resolved the Night Frost crisis with Nikita Khrushchev in 1959. Throughout his whole presidency, this is actually something funny. He always was he was a famous figure, no shit, and many people made caricatures about him, and he always remained very neutral about them. There was especially what was his name, Kari something, who made a lot of caricatures about Kekkonen. Kekkonen said about that not to criticize him. He used the note crisis in his advantage to kind of play friends with the Soviet Union and to keep his presidency. There is quite a good likelihood that he ordered the note crisis from his from the officials of the Soviet Union. Um, he condemned the Vietnam War with a heavy hand, but never publicly, so as to not uh, restrain any of the ties with the US. Proposed the Nordic disarmament zone in 1963, which was this, the Nordic countries shouldn't have any nuclear arms within them. It never passed. Also, yeah, he was elected again in 1962. I also forgot to mention, Paasikivi was president from 1956 to 19. No, not 1956, 1946 to 1956. then Kekkonen was president from 1956 to 1972, then wait, what? 1956 to 1962, 1962 to 1968, then from 1968 to 1978, and then from 1978 to 1982. And he essentially became the dictator of Finland in 1962. He basically had absolutely no opposition. He had basically all control of the government, and most of the parliament was with him. Also, he wasn't able to negotiate Nordek with the Soviet Union, and Nordek was this trade alliance which was supposed to be formed between the Nordic countries. So yeah, he failed that. It was in the 1960s when Nordek was proposed. After having gained the trust of the Soviet Union, he gave the country kind of an ultimatum. He basically said that the independence and sovereignty of Finland should continue indefinitely, or the UYY treaty would be dissolved forever. He also declined in 1978 the USSR defense minister's offer, Ustinov's offer for Finland and the USSR to have army training missions. He was also, maybe during these times or during the 1960s, I actually don't remember, considered for a Nobel Peace Prize, which I think he probably should have gotten, not Ahtisaari, who actually got it later on. Well, most of the criticism that I can give towards Kekkonen was that he was very, very authoritarian. He basically, like all of foreign politics of Finland were governed by him. His his presidency was continued with an undemocratic derogation in 1973, so that it would uh, stretch from 6 years to 10 years up until 1978. And I guess all of this power kind of got onto his head. He In 1981 he tried to get Mauno Koivisto to resign, unconstitutionally to get him to resign. Mauno Koivisto said to him, "No, we hold the essence of parliamentarism here in Finland. The government has to enjoy the acceptance and the trust of the parliament and not the president." This was kind of the point when Kekkonen kind of died away in spirit. 1981, and then in 1982 he resigned. And in his funeral, there were no cannon shots fired because he was a man of peace. That's, at least I think the story goes like that. His funeral was in 1984, and yeah, that's that. Urho Kekkonen, one of the greatest men in Finland, and either the greatest or the second greatest president of Finland. The only criticism I can give towards him are his more authoritarian things, you know. He deserves an ass with Stolberg. Then we have Mauno Koivisto. What? Koivisto. President from 1982 to 1988, and then from 1988 to 1994 for 2 terms. He helped Kekkonen secure some of the ties with the Soviet Union. He made internal economics better through evaluation in 1966. I think he was... Hold on. Was he... Was he the finance minister? Prime minister? I'm actually not sure what he was then. I know he was prime minister during late... Well, he was actually prime minister 2 times during Kekkonen's presidency. He also his government legalized abortion in 1970. one minus before his presidency would probably be that, along with Kekkonen, he was never able to negotiate about Nordic with the Soviet Union. Well, first of all, he, as president when he was elected in '82, he lengthened the YYA treaty for 20 years in 1983. When he heard that the Finnish Center Party, the National Coalition, and RKP were kind of like trying to form a new government, he kind of got mad and he established Harri Holkeri as the new prime minister, and thus Holkeri's government. And yeah, Harri Holkeri was the man who got the second most votes in the election of '82, and yeah, he named him as prime minister. And he was also a friend of Koivisto. Finland's EU application was formed during his presidency. I consider this a positive. I am well, pro-European Union. I could quickly give like my opinion on this, so it becomes clear. I support the idea of the EU. I think its current form is absolute dog shit for the most part. The European bureaucracy is, or the Brussels bureaucracy is absolutely awful. The European Commission is awful. What I would want the European Union to be is a democratic economic alliance, and that's that. That's what I would want it to be. So kind of the return into the 70s, what wasn't the European Union then, but the what was it? Hold on, what was it back then? The European Economic Community, 1970s. Yeah, it had to be the European Economic Community. Yeah. He dissolved Finland from the 1947 Paris Peace Treaties, which helped our military grow a bit. That was good. He supported Gorbachev, whom I like. He was one of the better leaders of the Soviet Union. He condemned his own. Well, there was this Noppa case. He condemned his own justice minister, Kai Korten, who he had named himself, for supporting the prosecutor of Noppa Oy, which was a Finnish construction company, and maybe still is. I'm actually not sure, for taking bribes. And yeah, I'm actually not sure why. It never gave, like, I don't understand why it was such a big thing for Koivisto to not like that. But yeah, just about all of the. I'd say Koivisto wasn't like. He wasn't that important. Of course he was important. He didn't do that many things, but the things he did were mostly pretty awesome. He held the mantle of Kekkonen quite well when keeping the neutrality. Oh, of course, one of the most important things, he parliamentarized the Finnish presidential position, so only 2 terms, and this kind of oversaw the the step forward in Finland's uh, history of presidential history, in the presidential position becoming more representative rather than executive. I would give Mauno Koivisto an A. He's either the third or the fourth best president of Finland, I would say. Uh, either Svinhufvud or Koivisto has the mantle of the third, or the title of the third best president in the history of Finland. Alright, 3 more left, and these guys have their pictures taken in color. Oh, Kekkonen also has, but yeah, still. Martti Ahtisaari, a famous diplomat before you know before his presidency, and well, he received the Nobel Peace Prize. I don't actually remember which year he received it in. It had to be, I think it was in the 2000s after his presidency. He tried finding, or was influential in trying to find a diplomatic solution to Yugoslavia in 1994, but NATO came and fucked everything up, as we all know. That's kind of what they seem to be doing often. One thing was that he was essential to the independence of Namibia. That's some fun fact, and I think he received some honorary of official positions in Namibia for that. His foreign diplomatic policy before his presidency was mostly kind of horrible in Africa, especially in Somalia. He kind of was supporting the wrong side there. That's not very fun. Then he became president. Well, he was an important diplomat in solving the Kosovo crisis, where NATO fucked everything up in 1999 and 2000. Uh, oh, I have to mention he was kind of a surprise president, because he had never been a member of the parliament and he had never held any ministerial position before he became the president. He was also the first president to be elected not through the electoral college but through direct democracy. There are a lot of bad sides here. He was an avid supporter of the European Commission. I don't like that at all. The European Commission sucks a lot. He was critical of reducing the power of the president to only being representative. I don't know if this is well. Okay, I oh, what should I say about this? Because I I believe that the presidential position is better as representative. I think the prime minister is a much better executive or the head of government, uh, who the president basically was for most of Finland's history. But yeah, like in my idealistic utopian world, the president for is purely representative, or in my utopian world there would be no need for, of course, a president. For in there would be very limited foreign politics, mostly only concerning economics and some bilateral trade. But yeah, that's about that. Maybe let's not get into my idealistic world building here. He kind of helped in a meeting in 1997 in Helsinki. He kind of helped negotiate about NATO and NATO moving more towards east in with Clinton and Yeltsin. All of these combined, I don't like Ahtisaari that much, and I have not that much respect towards him. Actually, well, no, I was gonna say that I have the least respect towards him, but there's another who I have even less respect towards, and I think it's no surprise to anyone that it is the second president or the next president on the list. Martti Ahtisaari gets a D, I think, for everything he has done, in good and in bad. Uh, I think he was the first step towards Finland not really being that neutral. Alright, Tarja Halonen. As Minister of Justice, I remember in 1990 he, or when Soviet Union was collapsing, he refused and turned back the refugees coming from the Soviet Union. I think this was a good thing. Many people criticize that move because they are like, the Soviet Union doesn't really like the centers a lot, but uh, the Soviet Union really didn't have any time to take care of them, and especially not Russia afterwards. So yeah, I think that is a bonus for his career before presidency. I like that he opposed. He was a very, or she. I mean, I'm sorry. She was a very vehement opposer of the church and other traditional models. Now, some of you may ask, hold on, I will drink water. Now, some of you may ask, well, Eddie, how can you say that? I thought you were a Christian. You said that in the last video. Yes, I do. I do in some ways consider myself still a Christian. Although, if some of you were to ask me whether or not God existed, I wouldn't be able to give you a clear answer on that. Most definitely not. And I think anyone who is able to give a clear answer on that is the most fucking boring person alive. But, uh, what was I even saying? Oh yeah, about the church. Yeah, I like that she opposed the church. I do too, as a Christian, because the church, both the Orthodox, the Protestant churches, and the Catholic Church, they are all extremely unbiblical foundations that are absolutely based on fucking nothing except, well, historically speaking, money and power, and still to some extent are based on power. So no, I don't like the churches as a good heartfelt Christian. Uh, what else? He opposed NATO very vehemently. I'm sorry, this is the problem, because in Finland we only have one pronoun for all people, hän, or third person pronoun, uh, hän, which is for both genders. So I often say he. But she was a vehement opposer of NATO and the Baltic countries joining NATO, and that actually reminds me of her saying that Estonia had the post-Soviet stress condition. Which she was a populist. She was kind of like our Trump. I I have very little respect towards her. I like her ideologically more than some of the presidents. So yeah, no, she isn't looking that good. Like, in all honesty, I just think she kind of did nothing. She just kind of stayed back, and that's especially true with her second term. She kind of just did nothing. Mostly wasted her second term and only complained about the people almost voting Niinistö in. As a person, I don't like her that much, but I have to feeling feelings let feelings go to hell and put her in sea. It's just she kind of did nothing. Wasn't a very important president. It's starting to show that most of these people, the further people, Ahtisaari, Tari Halonen, and Niinistö, they're all kind of not that big figures, because, well, they are representative presidents and not really executive. Even Mauno Koivisto to some extent wasn't that much executive anymore, but very much more executive than Halonen, Koivisto, or Niinistö. Well, what then we have Niinistö. Oh, also Tarja Halonen, president from 2000 to 2012. Niinistö, our current president, has been since 2012 and has continued that, and his term is supposed to end in 2024. First of all, during his time as a finance minister, we adopted the euro. National debt plummeted down from 70 to 40%, which is very good. Although not quite Ruti numbers, but still very, very fantastic. This is my favorite thing about Niinistö. When he was the speaker of the parliament, the members of the parliament had to stay in cheap hotels and travel in second class. This, of course, sparked a lot of criticism from those members. And I can only say to them, fuck you. I think Niinistö should have gone fucking full Thomas Sankara on you. Should have fucking sold your cars and your houses and whatever. If you want to be a representative of the people, then you must know how to live like the people. That's kind of basically what Niinistö also said about that. But yeah, no, I don't actually think he could have or would have sold their fucking cars like Sankara did. He was a part of Holkeri's government, Harri Holkeri, I mentioned him before when talking about Kovisto, and he supported the tax cuts. I don't support them. I I don't like taxes. My idea is that either 0% taxes or 100% taxes. Please, that would be great. But yeah, he didn't like the tax cuts and he supported them. Or no, I mean he didn't. He doesn't like taxes that much, and he supported the tax cuts. He then also hoarded large sums of money during his time as finance minister. We know that the Europe is we have debts that are this high, and then we have idle cash that is this high in the European Union, and he hoarded a lot of idle cash. Sauli Niinistö. During his presidency, well, there are two very noteworthy things. He got to be very good friends with Vladimir Putin, and then he also signed uh, Finland's application to NATO. I don't like NATO, if you already couldn't tell, and that is very annoying because always when I tell people that I don't like NATO, they think I am I support Russia. I consider NATO to be one of the greatest threats to world peace, as I do consider the Russian government also. Yeah. Uh, what else? Well, that's kind of neat, because well, he's a very representative president, and I mean his biggest accomplishment definitely was uh, building a very good relationship with Putin, and then well now kind of flushing it down. Uh, yeah. One thing that I kind of forgot about Tari Halonen that now comes to my mind when I'm talking about NATO was that he kind of severed some ties with the US, which I like. He kind of did the opposite, like she started severing some of those ties, like because I guess she thought that we have already severed all our ties to Russia and the Soviet Union back in the past. Now it's time to also get back into Finnish neutrality, which I really think we were in the need of and are in the need of, and I also like not supporting the US in any way possible. If I just said that the Russian government and NATO are some of the biggest threats to world peace, the US is the greatest threat to world peace, without a single doubt in my mind. The US is the greatest terrorist organization in the world, and you know millions of people in East Asia, in Africa, everywhere around the people die annually because of the US. And and then of course on top of that, the American governments that are backed by the government, or the American companies that are backed by the government, and the companies that back the government, the companies themselves of course cause enough damage on their own also. So yes, I consider the US to be the greatest threat to world peace. That's why I could even consider giving Halonen a B, but I think the C is good. Now Sauli Niinistö, all in all, I still do have more positive feelings towards him. I'll give him a B. I think the signing for the NATO application was not good. I think Finnish neutrality is. We are the last country on earth with the or at least we were the last country or in the West with the possibility of true neutrality, and the NATO application kind of fucked that. And it's always, we don't have to even support Russia in any way. We can just say that yeah, we support your war in Ukraine, and then of course inside here we actually don't. This is a Game of Thrones, and we should be playing it much more better. We are living in the Second Cold War. There's no doubt about it. Uh, when yeah, when we are living in an age when I am a Russophile because I don't like NATO, and when because I don't like Biden, it much has to mean that I like Trump, and because I think the churches are very evil means that I'm an atheist. That's when you know that we are fighting the Second Cold War. But yeah, what do you think about this list? Holy fuck, this went on long. This was probably an hour or so. Oh, okay. So let's go through this quickly. We have in S the greatest and the second greatest, whichever those are, and Stolperi and Kekkonen, then Svinhuvud and Koivisto here in A. Then maybe the fifth best, Ryti, sixth best, Paasikivi, seventh best, Niinistö. Then eighth best, Halonen. Ninth best, Kyösti, Kallio. 10th best, Ahtisaari. 11th, Relander. 12th, Mannerheim. That's our list. Do you agree? How much of a Russophile am I because I put Mannerheim in F? Tell me down in the comments below or somewhere, or send me death threats, whatever. This was very fun, for me at least. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Thank you, and goodbye.